Mere Orthodoxy has a brand new website. We've completely redesigned our website with readers in mind. From the layout to dark mode, downloadable PDFs and audio articles, a new dashboard for members that lets you bookmark articles, save quotes to a commonplace book, access your full reading history, get digital editions of all the past journals, site themes based on the church calendar, and much more. There has never been a better time to become a member of Mere Orthodoxy than right now. Through the end of June, get 20% off your first year of an annual membership or 3 months of a monthly membership. Not only will you get access to an incredible online experience, you'll support the ongoing work of Mere Orthodoxy, Mere Fidelity, and much more to come. Mere Orthodoxy is a reader-supported publication. We can do this work because of readers and listeners like you. Go to mereorthodoxy.com today to see the new site and get 20% off your first year of an annual membership or 3 months of a monthly membership. That's mereorthodoxy.com to see the new site and get 20% off membership today.
This episode is brought to you by Lexham Press, who publishes books that love the Word, love the faith, and love the church. Lexham Press is an imprint of the Baker Publishing Group. Our June book of the month is The Pursuit of Character, Recovering the Virtues by Matthew Arbo. You can receive a 30% discount on this title and all previous books of the month by visiting bakerbookhouse.com/pages/Mere Fidelity. You can find that link in our show notes to get 30% off of our book of the month from Lexham Press. Hello and welcome to another episode of Mere Fidelity, a podcast by Mere Orthodoxy where we think about the Word of God and the world we live in. My name is Rishmawy and I'll be your host for today. I'm joined by regular cast and crew member Brad East.
Glad to be back. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. A peaceful minute. No. But we're also joined not only by Brad East. I'm actually surrounded by Brads. We're joined by Brad Littlejohn today, who is, you said, director of?
Program director and policy advisor at American Compass.
At American Compass, who is currently doing kind of policy work in D.C. around AI. And you've been a friend of the show, longtime friend, important work in ethics. And so what we thought we'd have you on to discuss today is the Pope's AI encyclical. I know this is maybe 3 weeks late, which is ages when it comes to
multiple model releases,
as well as takes. The amount of takes that have come out since then, we're just so slow on the game here. But we want to talk about the Pope's encyclical on AI, Magnifica Humanitas, right? I'm sure I said the Latin wrong, but this is kind of, this is the first encyclical from this Pope. It is the first encyclical on AI ever, to my knowledge, and it's just a significant cultural event where across the world people are reading a theological text, engaging with the advent of this new technology, if we can even use that word for it. And so what we wanted to do was engage it, reflect on it, have you on to think about it a little bit. And obviously, East, you've been thinking about AI for a while now. And so we hope this conversation will be illuminating. We're barely going to scratch the surface, but for right now, what I wanted to ask was, Dr. Littlejohn, situate it for us. What is the Pope trying to do in this encyclical? And then we'll talk about how successful it is.
Well, he's trying to do a lot. There's no question about that. And I mean, I think, if I had a critique, it might be that it's trying to do too many things at once. Mm-hmm. But I think he sees himself as opening a conversation, setting the stage, sort of laying out the groundwork for Catholic moral philosophers and pastors to really build in 100 different directions. But of course, I think many people on the listeners may be aware of this, but just if you're not, this is very much within this tradition of. It's not just within the tradition of Catholic social teaching. It is very self-consciously referencing the beginning of Catholic social teaching. Leo XIII's encyclical Rerum Novarum from 1891. This Pope Leo XIV explicitly said he took that name. He's the first Leo since Leo XIII, and he sees himself as trying to follow in his footsteps in a certain way, because he sees the scale of the challenges that AI is unleashing as, at the very least, comparable to the scale of the challenges of industrial capitalism that were unfolding in the 19th century. And so, what Leo XIII was seeking to do was, to sort of get the church up to speed in grappling with the just tremendous changes that were being unleashed in the world by new technologies and the political implications of those technologies, and saying that this is in fact a conversation that Christians have to grapple with theologically and be willing to bring to bear the timeless truths of the faith on the newest things. And so this encyclical is trying to do something similar, but I think we can go beyond that and say, like Rerum Novarum, it doesn't take a position sort of for or against the new things.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, in fact, this was a key thing about Leo XIII, I think, or later in his pontificate, is that the papacy, until the later 19th century, really had always kind of taken a stance against new things, right? I mean, it was very aggressively conservative and reactionary. And in that encyclical, importantly, the Pope is saying, no, we need to respond to these new things. We need to make sense of them. We need to make sure that we are bringing to bear Christian moral reflection, but we are embracing, might be too strong a word, but certainly accepting and taking agency over these new things, right? And I think this encyclical is trying to do something similar, right? It's not really for or against AI. It's raising the question, as Rerum Novarum was, it's not just a question of do we have these technologies, but who has them? Who actually controls them, right? Is power concentrated in a small handful of individuals, so that the technology just becomes an instrument of consolidated power? Or can we use political institutions to ensure that the control of the technology is widely dispersed, that individuals have genuine agency over how it's applied in their lives? So that's, I think, the big question that this encyclical is raising. The title is always very important, right? And in this case, it's being billed as an encyclical about AI, and yet it really is an encyclical about humanity, first and foremost. I mean, a lot of people are like, it doesn't actually say enough about, people complain it didn't say enough about AI. But the point is, AI is pressing upon us the question of what is humanity actually? What is distinctive about humanity? What is the magnificence of humanity that has to be safeguarded? And so the question is much less one of what do we do with AI than what is AI doing to us, and how do we need to make sure that we protect our humanity in the face of it?
Yeah. East, love to hear you talk about the attempt as well. I have my own thoughts, but
yeah, I'm the one on the pod who's going to say that I am grateful for the tradition of papal encyclicals, and maybe Littlejohn can join me, so it's 2 against 1. But I think throughout the conversation, I'm sure we're all going to share some recommendations of further reading. Matthew Walter in the New York Times, who's a traditional Catholic and wonderful writer, was very disappointed by it. And one of the things he said, almost as a side note, was nobody's going to care. Like this is not going to move the needle. And I have been impressed by how not true that's been. I don't mean that Silicon Valley is going to change what it does because of the encyclical, but I actually think, setting aside Derek's concerns that Leo may be the Antichrist, I just find myself extraordinarily moved in moments like this, when the ostensible head of the church, a stream of the church, presents to the world explicitly biblical, theological, and traditional teaching on the nature of creation, the nature of the human person, and contemporary ethical and social challenges, and everybody listens. Like every major news outlet and opinion venue in many languages on every continent says, let's talk about it. Like finally, at least someone is not even standing up for humanity, but saying these things matter, and 2 billion plus souls on earth belong to this community. A lot more than that claim faith in the God of Abraham even more than that, claim to believe in one God. Hey, the questions of AI, the questions raised by AI concern both God and human beings. And so I find myself moved in a way by how many people reached out to me who do not read theological texts, who said, wow, like I'm learning about encyclicals, or like the political, I had a very Protestant friend say, I'm deeply moved by the political vision, like the vision of the church's political office or role outlined in this text, whatever the prescriptions or prohibitions. And so for me, it's kind of a meta moment prior to substantive analysis or evaluation, to say that, like, this is a model, not just for future popes or for bishops in the Catholic Church or priests, but for all Christians, teachers, leaders, pastors of every kind. It's a model to speak into the issues of the day with boldness and confidence rooted in the gospel and scripture. And that's like my primary takeaway, even before we get to the nitty-gritty of AI.
It's just nice that he tried, right? Just to be deflationary. No, I hear that. That's all real. I mean, just the fact that the chatter everywhere within a few hours, everybody had been reading it. I doubt, although how quickly some people read it made me think that some people had actually just were dealing with an AI summary at that point. But you know, it is heartening in many ways. I will say I was surprised by it in several senses. One, I thought so much of the chatter was weirdly off in its evaluation and understanding of it. Open to interpretation here. But it was actually a far more positive encyclical than I imagined it was going to be. And the other people, posting memes about the Pope starting an AI, Butlerian jihad, were just bizarrely off point to me. This is extraordinarily positive. It's not AI pilled, but this was nowhere near the Butlerian jihad that people were hoping for in terms of its negative evaluation. It was also, for me, surprisingly less theological than I anticipated it being. The first section was a helpful primer for people who are unfamiliar with the social teaching of the Catholic Church, that tradition. It was kind of like, hey, here's your big long summary on that. We're going to catch up to speed. And in some ways, it's a model of kind of putting the cookies on the bottom shelf for people who are unfamiliar with basic Catholic teaching. So it's like a model for catechesis. And so that I thought was a strong point, as well as realizing, I think, just the fact that the Pope is putting out an encyclical on AI. I think they knew it was going to catch attention in a different way, in a way that, Pope Benedict's first encyclical on, I think it was Hope. He had. So the positive, the meta moment was the Pope taking serious his capacity to be an evangelist of a sort, however light you think the gospel might have been presented, in terms of the ability to teach socially, catch people up to speed, give people some basic instruction, Catholic social teaching. That was positive. I will just say I was actually fairly underwhelmed when it came to the theological content, the amount of it, and the depth of it. I saw some of the subtitles, one of the incarnate word. I'm like, oh, good. We're going to get some real Christological reflection on the anthropology, all these sorts of things. And that was really thin. It was theologically thin. And maybe it's because the last encyclicals I read were Benedict's, and we were dealing with, Ratzinger he was a theologian in his own right before he was poping, before he poped. So that was just my initial read of it was, hey, it's doing some real work catechetically, but it was actually thinner than I had hoped, and way less negative than I thought it was going to be, and in ways that I had hoped it was going to be. I will say that the critique that I appreciated was Yuval Levin's over at New Atlantis. We can get to that in a minute, but I think that there were some places where he really just missed the opportunities, either to be really positive or negative. It was kind of actually just too moderate. I wanted it to blow hotter and colder at the same time. And so I don't think that's just me being Protestant, but concerns about, Antichrist aside. Yeah. So Brad, or Littlejohn, I'd love to hear, where do you think it actually leveled a significant, made a significant contribution to theological reflection on the phenomena of AI, or was it really more just the question of the social impact of AI?
Yeah. No, I think you're entirely right in terms of being theologically thin. In fact, I mean, just everything thin, in a sense that it's too much, too little butter scraped over too much bread would be my
Yeah.
critique. And that they're like most, how many paragraphs are in it? I don't know, like 200 or something, or about 250. It's like 120 different topics covered in, like 2 paragraphs each.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are like really good. I mean, like, oh, I love where I think you're going there. I want to hear more. But it's like, oh, all right, on to the next thing, and then, and I mean, I obviously that was an intentional choice to say AI raises a zillion different questions, and we think it's important to go ahead and like touch on almost all of them briefly.
Yeah.
And then I think, and and the moderation is, I mean, maybe as a Protestant, we should actually appreciate this, right? It's this is actually the Pope using his teaching office in a very non-popish way. He is leaving it to he's taking sort of, these are initial stabs, initial conversation openers on a lot of different fronts, and then inviting the rest of the church to fill in all the gaps going forward, right? As opposed to just like, pontificating, right?
That's a positive spin.
Pun intended, right? But that said, I think you're absolutely right. Now, this is where I agreed. I think I haven't read that many takes. Actually, I think I only read 2 takes, and they were both New Atlantis, Yuval Levins and Claire Coffey's. I think they were both kind of spot on in their own way.
It's never a bad place to start and end.
And his complaint and your complaint, is that like, I would have rather it did less and did it deeper and really, brought to bear some more distinctively theological reflection. And that would have been, on the theme of idolatry. That's what Yuval says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that's what this is crying out for. And the word is barely mentioned. And like the one time it is mentioned, it's just sort of like the idolatry of prophet, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, okay, we've had the idolatry of prophet, for a long time. Yes. Like I'm totally fine with the church calling that out. I'm not going to, be all pearl clutching capitalist here, but there's a lot more to say about AI than the idolatry of prophet. And I think, in fact, this is where it's too easy. It's too easy to be like, oh, this is just another bunch of tech billionaires trying to make a few billion more. They think, and so the critique of AI is this is just a play for wealth, and it's something much, much deeper and much more religious than that. And I think the Babel metaphor was a great opportunity to sort of think about the kind of the macro level of idolatry, how kind of AI represents this sort of civilizational project of trying to transcend our humanity and create God, create God in our own image, and the way in which that can become just an absolutely transfixing ideal for so many powerful people. But also, I think it needed that, but it also needed, and this is where I think Claire Coffey's piece kind of maybe contributes as well, is a focus on kind of the micro idolatry, the micro side of the idolatry, the household gods. Actually, one of the best things I've read on AI was actually drawing attention to the ancient Near Eastern phenomenon of the household gods, which sort of crop up occasionally in the Old Testament, right? These just little things you carried around with you wherever you went, and burned a little incense to them and pray, asked them for blessing and hope that you didn't make them angry. And we're all, to some extent, the smartphone is already that, but the AI enabled smartphone is definitely our household god that we are praying to instead of praying to the Almighty God.
Whispering, seeking guidance. That little point is significant. The attempt to remake and reshape the fundamental structure of how the human is and breathes and lives and thinks just needs a few pages at least of I don't know, phenomenological reflection. not to mention theological reflection, that is Christological, reflection on the soul. I think the idolatry point was very, very significant. But I'm curious, Brad, about you, East. Sorry. For me, one thing the other component I thought was missing was reflection in relation to the doctrine of vocation and creation, like Genesis 1-3, and the kind of the ramifications of there. But East, you've actually had a lot of reflections on vocation. I'd be curious where you'd like to go with that, or what you would have seen, or if you think we're just being mean.
Yeah, no, unfortunately the spice will be lacking in this pod, because I completely agree with y'all. I wanna tug on a couple threads that I was encouraged by, but basically like y'all, I was underwhelmed. And I completely agree, Derek, that I know it's me. I'm not even on social media, and I got the sense that there were people who were like, this is a guy who read Dune in the 60s. And it was like, it's not clear to me at all. I'm sure he did.
Read a few more volumes.
Yeah, he needs to keep going. So yeah, it honestly feels like a nothing burger in its substance. Not even because I felt like he needed to be stronger in his denunciations. I think a posture, so Yuval Levin says in the New Atlantis that Leo XIII had the benefit of writing at the end of the 19th century, looking back at a century or more of industrial capitalism, whereas Leo XIV is looking forward to the next century of the quote-unquote age of AI. That's a really astute point, and you can feel it. You can feel him not even really knowing what we're talking about yet. And even myself, like I'm as anti-AI as anybody can be in practice and in theory, but we just use those two little letters to describe everything now. So we have to know what we're talking about. Do we mean every instance of or use of a large language model? Do we mean someone using it like a super Google to ask for a good local restaurant when they're traveling? Like, I don't have it on my phone. I don't use it on my laptop. I, of course, would never use it in my writing. But we're at the forefront of an explosion of 1,000 use cases and 1,000 different forms of the technology we place under this one umbrella. And what would have been helpful, I wouldn't have minded him not really coming down hard on anything.
Yeah.
Or at least most things, but at least being clear what we're talking about. And then what I appreciated, this was a positive thing, where he said from the pulpit, so to speak, if not from the chair, that it is not a human being. It is not the same as a human person. It does not have moral conscience. It never will. He laid out some basics there that are useful for Catholic catechesis and maybe Christian conversation as a baseline. He was weirdly non-committal on sort of like having conversations with a chatbot that maybe they can be useful, but also they're bad. That was, I think, the low point for me. I think what he could have said was, whatever the technology is and will become, the church can be clear in its proscription of the following, and we will continue to exercise judgment about some of this stuff. And the following would have been things like forming friendship, forming romantic relationship, all the idolatry stuff, right? There could have been some clarity without, as you said, Brad, about 2 paragraphs on education, 2 paragraphs on vocation, 2 paragraphs on unemployment, and it's just skimming the surface on everything and not going deep enough on anything.
I want to just push back a bit, or just you sort of said we're in agreement. We're all underwhelmed. I want to characterize my response a little differently, which is,
be nice. Are you going to be nice, Brad? Are you going to be the nice? I thought East was going to be the nice Brad today.
I was. I would have wished for a different document, but that doesn't mean that the document should have been written to my wishes, right? I think there was an intention. I think we can. There's some things we can say here, and I have said, like following Yuval Levin, like some clear missed opportunities for things that, in my mind, clearly should have been in there. But in general, my verdict is they clearly made a decision to go wide, like fairly wide and shallow, opening up a bunch of lines of conversation for the church to then carry forward and fill out, rather than going deep and narrow. And that was a decision that, there's pros and cons. And I think for what there's always a danger of criticizing an author for not writing the book that you would have written. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, did the author write the book that they intended to write? And was that a worthwhile thing to do? And in this case, I think, yes, it was for the most part. And I think there are places where, even in fairly brief treatments, some pretty significant things are said. And maybe to us, maybe part of the difference might be to you, they're like, just sort of like, well, duh, that's why you can say nothing burger. In my world, they're not duh, the paragraph, the key paragraph saying, AI is not conscious, not capable of moral agency, blah, 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 blah.
That triggered so many people.
That triggered people, right?
People were so mad.
Is that true?
Oh my God. Matt Iglesias lost his mind just that the Pope sounded like souls were immortal and it sounded, too dualist or whatever.
Some piece in the Wall Street Journal that was like, the Pope in here apologizes for the Catholic Church's previous treatment of slavery, and he may, find himself apologizing in the future for,
oh my gosh,
dehumanizing AI.
Dehumanizing AI. Yeah. People lost their minds.
The section on autonomous weapons, where he just said very categorically, this is a big deal in my circles. He just said categorically, like, no, you can't have, there's no moral way to have fully autonomous weapons, which is going to be I'll just say it's going to be a major flashpoint, right? Because this is one of these areas in which I'm sorry, but like if the other guy in the battlefield has an autonomous weapon and you don't,
I actually had that thought. I mean, Doubt that had who was it on the podcast the other day? It was not the Palantir, Anduril. That conversation with the iPhone. But the reality is,
lookalike. Have you ever noticed that?
No, I had not.
You've got to look. It's uncanny.
I mean, those kinds of things. I'm curious. Well, I will say one other section I did flag.
Stay there, Derek. Stay there in the war, because
this is one thing that I'm curious if this is going to be an interesting split on. I don't know that Protestants should or would have substantive disagreements here, but if Leo putting his foot on the pedal in one direction, and Protestants maybe having the freedom to put the brake there or push a different gas pedal, that might be just an interesting split in terms of the way the moral theology of war develops here. And because it is hard when you have some of those principles in play and thinking about the protection of human life, protection of boundaries and nations, and just the ability to defend yourself. If you say ahead of the time, no, like, I will only ever use a sword. I will never ever use a gun, or I will never use an automatic. I will never use an automatic weapon. I will only use a normal gun. If you say that, and the other side's going to get the automatic, or they're going to get the, and you just tell them ahead of time, yeah, if you get that, you're going to be able to kill me. Some of those other principles, I don't like it. I don't like the idea of autonomous. So there has to be something like, some sort of human override on that. But I have questions of all I'm saying. I'm not an ethicist.
Yeah.
And I might sound like immoral person here, but Brad's pushback on me here. I will say, as a side note, I did like the little section on transhumanism and posthumanism.
Yeah. Two good paragraphs there. Two good paragraphs for sure.
And now for a quick word from one of our sponsors. Beeson Divinity School is an interdenominational evangelical seminary on the campus of Sanford University in Birmingham, Alabama. I've been there. It is actually a lovely campus. Led by world-renowned faculty, Beeson forms students in person in a kind of a community-oriented model of theological education, and they have top-ranked scholars who engage their students at kind of very small class sizes. It's a warm environment. And now, thanks to a generous gift, Beeson is actually offering new full tuition scholarships for the 2025-2026 incoming class for their flagship degree, the Master of Divinity. So this kind of makes the whole thing more affordable than it's ever been. Now, these scholarships cover the cost of tuition and fees for 3 years, which is the average time it takes to finish the MDiv. And I'll be honest and say, I wish I had known about this or had an opportunity to look at this when I was heading to seminary. So if you're interested, you can apply and learn more information at beesondivinity.com.
Well, on the war thing, I mean, I think the truth of the matter is the only way you solve the game theory dynamics is with an international treaty, right? I mean, this is what and this is how we ended up handling like chemical and biological weapons and then and nuclear weapons, and we haven't like fully solved. We haven't put Pandora back in its box fully, and you still have terrorists you got to worry about. But for the most part, all the major nations have said, okay, yeah, we don't. All right, we won't use it if you won't use it. Okay, all right, we've all agreed we're not going to use it, right? So I think you do need something similar for autonomous weapons, and of course the issue of international institutions comes up a lot in this encyclical, and that triggered a lot of people in sort of MAGA world.
You still end up with Cold War dynamics of when you're dealing with somebody who like a regime that lies consistently. Oh, we'll never develop those weapons, and like except the weapons are the kinds of things that you don't even have to develop these things in large, massive missile silos. It's just a certain kind of program that is, when you're looking at it from a satellite, is utterly indistinguishable. And you could just be developing this program to integrate within your firing systems secretly. And then, we haven't been doing. Okay, actually we did it, and now you're all dead. Like that's kind of the hard thing. I am not pro these systems. I am slightly skeptical of saying obviously no to these systems. That is all I will commit to at this point. But one Brad is smiling, one Brad wasn't smiling.
I'm officially back on.
But do you hear what I'm saying, East? Go for it.
Yeah, well, I just want to say I'm officially back on Team Leo, and Littlejohn has persuaded me that actually all of these things needed to be said, and they're antiseptic to me, but they're revolutionary in DC and Silicon Valley. This goes back to so I wrote a piece for CT in April about just war theory, and conversations I've had in recent months, really in recent years, with friends and especially certainly pundits who respond to all the ways that just war theory constrains, limits, and slows down the prosecution of war, either going to it or carrying it out, executing it, with, well, that makes it harder, so much the worse for just war theory. To which my response is, like, that's the point. Like, it's minus just war theory, it's unrestrained. And the theory, because it's meant to make it ethical or at least morally justified, is going to have that. It's going to have that effect inevitably, because our fallen fleshly selves aren't restrained except by God's good command. And so in this case, to Derek, I understand what you're saying at a human level, but it doesn't move the needle 1 millimeter for me, because I want to know whether it's just, not whether it's going to prevent the other guy from winning, because you can do all kinds of unjust things to prevent the other guy from winning. Now, we may have principle.
Winning, though, is killing you and your family and everything you hold dear.
But
just
Derek,
gonna put that in the parentheses.
Derek, you and I are Christians who know that is not the greatest evil. That is not the greatest evil. Yes?
Yeah, no, obviously. But I'm just saying,
there is no Christian consequentialism that gets us out of the need to justify these decisions.
No. But just war theory has always it's not a consequentialist doctrine, and yet it has certain subcategories where calculation and recognition of reasonable measures of success. There is a realm where calculation is involved, even if it's not consequentialist in its foundational principle. So
what I appreciate,
all I'm saying is, I need to read some more paragraphs.
Yeah, what I
I need to read
appreciated,
some more
and then
paragraphs.
I want to kick this to Littlejohn, but what I appreciated, to again say something positive, was it may be the most serious part of the document where he says we need to understand the chains of decision making that go from a human being
Yes.
to a
Yeah.
human being losing his life. And if there are breaks in that chain and it's an opaque machine that has calculated that an immortal soul will die today, then that's a problem. And I think that is a wonderful way to frame it for the world.
That's a significant point. I'm just saying I need more paragraphs.
Yeah.
Littlejohn.
Well, we could spend all our time talking about that.
Yeah.
Let me pivot to something that I think the part that I most appreciated, because I was on another a webinar about it last week, and they said like read one passage that stuck out at you. So I'll just do the same thing here. I'll read it here, and then it's a theme in several places, but particularly in paragraph 51. It says, it is important to ensure that this growth and appreciation of human dignity is not obscured by the pressure of new ideologies or very powerful interests in today's world. Among these ideologies, I consider particularly insidious the one that suggests that every person must earn or justify his or her own worth to the point of attributing greater value to those who are more efficient or effective.
Yeah.
From this perspective, persons end up being reduced to a means of achieving results, a resource to be used and exploited, and are no longer recognized as a proper end in themselves who should never be instrumentalized. The value of persons does not depend on what they achieve or produce. So why is this important? Well, because, I've been thinking about, so the document is trying to guard against sort of danger in two directions, right? So on the one hand, and see, there's all this conversation right now about how is AI going to impact jobs, right? And people say that there's this sort of one view in Silicon Valley that it's going to be, it's going to be awesome because no one's going to have to work anymore. To which there's this sort of theological response that says, well, no. Actually, work is a very important part of what it means to be human. We gain meaning and dignity through work and so on. But then there's this that can easily, and the encyclical talks about that. Like work is important. It is an important part of human dignity. But it's also clear that there's an idolatry of work in the modern world, an idolatry of being as productive as possible. Byung-Chul Han, who's one of my favorite contemporary philosophers, talks a lot about the phenomenon of auto-exploitation, self-exploitation, and basically how the nature of the digital economy is it has persuaded all of us to. We don't need a sort of Marxist exploitation of the factory owner like trying to squeeze every bit of work out of us. We squeeze it out of ourselves because of the pressure to perform for an audience in the digital world. And I think there's a very imaginable, well, not just a future, a present that is happening right now in terms of AI's primary impact on jobs so far, and we'll have to, nobody can agree on what it will be 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever. But so far, AI's primary impact on jobs is making people work much harder because now they have this tool that can help them be super productive. And so then the pressure to use the tool as much as possible, to be as productive as possible, increases. And there's a real danger that we're headed for a world in which you have, some people who aren't working at all, and they're just, watching AI slop feeds all day long. And then other people that are, just in a rat race of accelerating auto exploitation, trying to use AI to justify their, we are insecure about the value of our humanity because AI seems to be smarter than us. How can I justify my humanity? Well, I guess I had better produce results, right? And I experienced that temptation in myself every single day. And so that paragraph and other paragraphs like it in the encyclical really resonated. And the Pope responds, of course. He has other paragraphs where he really talks about the importance of weakness, right? And this is the Christological, this is where the theology does really come in, right? That Christ teaches us that our humanity is found in weakness and suffering, not in maximal production.
There's a really lovely way in which the grandeur of humanity that you find in and throughout the document is the grandeur of finitude. It's not the grandeur of immortal, being uploaded into the cloud, and digitally existing eternally. And there's a lovely, I think, way in which the Catholic Church's witness on abortion is now and I didn't do a word search, but I didn't in my read of it see unborn or abortion as words, although I may have missed those. But there's a way in which the Catholic Church's longstanding witness on the unborn is reflected in a document that says, well, now maybe we're all in the position of the unborn,
right. Yeah.
relative to a culture that says, unless you can demonstrate your worth, unless you're one of the 1%, unless you're a billionaire, trillionaire in this particular space, we don't see why we should keep you around. Maybe we'll tolerate you, or maybe we'll just set you to the side. And I think in one sense 2,000 years, but especially 150 years, and especially maybe 70 years worth of witness on one of those sides, and of course euthanasia on the other. And now, there are people in Silicon Valley who just like in the Children of Men wouldn't mind the quietus, where they just take us to sea and dump us overboard if we can't really produce.
Paragraph 55. This is the one reference I found. Among these rights, the first is the right to life from conception to its natural end, without which it is impossible to exercise any other right. When this fundamental right is denied, as in the cases of induced abortion, killing of the innocent, and euthanasia, we are faced with choices the church considers gravely wrong, etc. So it's there, and I'm glad that he threw in the euthanasia, because the transhumanism push, the posthumanism push, the technological, the functionality, reducing so much of human dignity. And actually, Matt Anderson had a little reflection on the flexibility and kind of fuzziness of dignity as a term, but the reduction of dignity to utility is just endemic elsewhere. And I see it with some of my college kids, my college students, is the justifying your existence by getting a job where you can grind and produce and so on and so forth. That I think is a really important pushback, especially when you're looking at the culture of Silicon Valley and the kinds of conversations that you see some of these folks have about how interchangeable computational power is for thinking and being, and all that right there. The reduction of dignity to utility is actually one of the key ideological, I think, pillars for rendering the human superfluous. So that's a really important point.
Yeah,
that you guys brought up,
Derek, and I'll add. I think I at the end, after 40 minutes, I am formally recanting and rescinding my nothing burger comment. I apologize to Pope Leo XIV. I hope he forgives me.
Once again, Leo pilled.
I'm back, baby. But the reason is
you're welcome, Brad. You're welcome.
In all seriousness, the three guys on this call and the kind of folks that we interact with, we read theology for breakfast. And when I come to this document, just like you said, Derek, Benedict is an outlier. Most of the time, these documents can feel a little antiseptic. They can feel like a committee document. They can feel wide, not deep. They can feel like they're skimming along the surface. And maybe that's actually precisely what they are meant to do. And that doesn't make them immune from critique. But what it says is, don't, as you said, Littlejohn, don't criticize it for being what it was never meant to be, and could not have been, because it's addressed to the world. It's not addressed to PhDs or theologians. And as we kind of walk back through some of these things, while like y'all, I would have loved a little bit more biblical exegesis, a little bit more Genesis 1-4, or maybe 1-11. I liked the bits on the incarnation. I loved ending with the Magnificat. There were real virtues there, but I would have liked more. I'm realizing that Leo really is introducing not just defense industry execs or Silicon Valley bros, but he's introducing everyone to a whole way of viewing the world and a way of viewing humanity that is not native to most people. And that's a really good thing. That's an achievement in itself.
Well, all right. We came to a new agreement. Okay.
Okay. I don't know. There you guys. Okay. I see that. I do think I'm gonna retain my desire. I just wish it was a little bit more aggressive in either direction, in positive and negative. Like I just think I like turning the treble up and the bass up at the same time. And that's a little bit more on what I want. It's fine. Maybe you still cover, but I think the punches need to be harder and the affirmations need to be harder simultaneously, as a whole.
You know, Derek, one way to put that is the biblical frame is Babel versus Jerusalem versus rebuilding the walls. And that's an either or. That's an Augustinian two cities approach. But then in the entire middle, he's constantly doing a both sides. Like, like there's it's neither intrinsically good nor intrinsically evil. So that's an odd dance because the Augustinian frame suggests that we're going to get some hard no's, and yes, we do get some no's. But I think maybe a little bit of the feel of disjunction is that we're set up for a no to Babel and a yes to rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, and at times there's a little bit of both sides. There are good points. Yes to each, but in moderation. And that was when I was dissatisfied. That's why I was dissatisfied.
Weirdly, right? I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but creation and new creation, we had a lot of, like, you have Babel and Jerusalem, but there's also, kind of garden and future New Jerusalem as things that we're falling away from and things that we need to be wary of trying to rush towards. And I guess trying to rush towards New Jerusalem with illicit means is the temptation of Babel, I suppose. So that's fine. Littlejohn.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say this is taking us in a slightly different direction, but I think part of the frustrating, but what do you call it, both sidesism or whatever, is the ambiguity on its use of the tool metaphor, right? And so this is, of course, the oldest cliche in the book when it comes to discussions of technology. Technology is just a tool, and what matters is not intrinsically good or bad. What matters is how you use it, blah, blah, blah. And the document has some of those statements. It also has some interesting statements where it challenges it highlights the limits of the tool metaphor. And one I had just marked, I think there's some others, but paragraph 92, this makes it clear that technology is not simply a tool. When it becomes the standard by which everything is judged, it begins to dictate what matters and what can be discarded, reducing creation to an object of exploitation and human beings to mere cogs in a system driven toward ever greater efficiency. And so I made a note there, like ruler, not tool, or a ruler is a kind of tool, right? But a tool of measurement is. I mean, on the one hand, it's neutral. It can measure anything. It's just telling you a quantity. It's not, but it's not neutral because it is applying a standard of measurement that then becomes that then sets a standard of value toward which things try and conform, right? And teachers know this, right? That when you have a standardized test, that becomes a standard of measurement that then can shape the whole curriculum or you're teaching to the test. And what we have found is that, and of course, money is a technology in some sense, right? It's a social technology. It's a tool, but because it's a standard of value, we reorder our whole lives in obedience to the values that it sets, right? And so I think that's an important insight in this paragraph, right? Why it's not just a tool, right? I think I would have also liked to see a distinction between tool and machine. This comes from Hannah Arendt, that basically, a tool remains, in a paradigmatically in a tool, the human being remains active. The tool is an instrument in their hands that is dependent upon their physical strength, right? The hammer swing. If I'm stronger, the hammer swings faster. Now, yes, me swinging a hammer can do a lot more damage than me, just punching something. But my actual native strength determines what the hammer does. Not so a machine, which has its ability to operate totally outside of the effort that I bring to it, such that I then start to conform my own bodily movements. So she's talking about physical tools and physical machines, but I think similarly with intellectual tools and intellectual machines, something that's able to operate entirely outside of my activity means that I then become conformed to it rather than it being conformed to me. Right?
Yeah.
So these are ways in which I think this is where I think there was a kind of a missing phenomenological core in what technology actually is in this document.
Yeah, that I think really puts its finger on something significant that I was hoping for and missing, and which I think can be, to your point, East, it can be done in a way that is accessible to your average kind of like outside the theological discipline reader, that is very illuminating and helpful, helping people see themselves and hear themselves and recognize the way that they're engaging with these things in new ways that they just can't even understand. I saw the most disheartening posts, and I don't know how real these are. It's like, fake, Reddit posts where somebody posts something and then they'll post it on Twitter or whatever, just cross post it. But some kid talking about how, like, hey, yeah, my phone wasn't charging, and I realized I can actually imitate ChatGPT in my mind. So I'll like ask a question and anticipate what I think it would say. And it was like, this kid just re-engineered, inner monologue and the process of thinking, but that kind of element of like the kid thinking himself like, wow, guys, I don't know if anybody else has a superpower. I have an internal ChatGPT, and it sounds too fake. It's like somebody made this to troll. I know somebody made this to troll me, and nevertheless,
I can iterate alone.
I can iterate alone. I have had, you're having conversations, even very smart students, about the way that they interact with this stuff and the formative element. That's where I'm saying that the deeper. He was doing foundational stuff about human dignity, all that sort of stuff, but the deeper kind of anthropological, the stuff that I think a Catholic theologian could do pretty well, the inner work of the soul, and the mind. That is what I would love to see more of. So that's that. Last little subsection before we land the plane here. East, did you have a question you wanted to ask our other Brad?
Well, I started Meta, and I'm going to end Meta, and I'll hand on, and then I'll hand it off, Littlejohn, which is just this. This is kind of putting some of the pieces of this conversation together for me, since I've kind of had my own mind changed. This is interesting. It's like I'm talking to two chatbots at the same time. Is this something that people do? I actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and give this anecdote. Because I was defending.
This is what they call a multi-agent interaction.
There we go. I was defending the non-usage of ChatGPT to an actual pastor who was saying he was saying that it was nice to have someone to bounce ideas off of for like sermons and lessons, and it was like, that we've been doing that for a long time with something called Friends. I mean. And that might betray a kind of relational or ministerial poverty that needs to be addressed on its own. But it was one of those moments where you did realize that the technology had already replaced a paradigm in his mind of just grabbing coffee with a friend before you worked on a sermon or a passage. But what I want to say at the meta level is, on one hand, this is my impression. I'm not in DC. I'm not in Silicon Valley. This is my impression from afar. Is that there are genuinely, sincerely, non-faking, non-propaganda, AI-pilled people who really believe that this stuff is legit, that it's online, that it's conscious, that it has surpassed us or will soon, and that we have already been made obsolete. And there's a subset of them who don't even mind. There's even a weird kind of desire, like they're dying to see us replaced. We are suboptimal performers,
Yeah.
and they want to see it. And then in the rest of the world, among normies, Christian or otherwise, there is this latent nagging sense that that's wrong, but it's really difficult to articulate why. It's really difficult if you've been trained by a framework that does give value by performance or output or utility. It's difficult to articulate the value of a child or a human being with Down syndrome or of a 95-year-old with dementia. Or maybe just a stay-at-home mom or a dad who doesn't work in the tech sector and he doesn't have an impressive job you write things about, right? Whatever it is, people have this sense that, no, there's something wrong with that minority who wants to replace us. But I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a theologian. I just have these instincts, and I'm the one obsolete, so maybe I'm just the dummy who has to catch up so I'm not left behind. And a document like this is a gift in the sense that it's the beginning of a grammar and a framework that says, no, your instincts are right. They're God-given. The grandeur of humanity is not found where they say it's found. In all of your smallness and in all of your limits and in the limits of those you love, your neighbors, your friends, your family, that's and this is where the Pope got it right. That's what God became in the incarnation. Like, he took on our flesh. Not just some other creature like a dolphin or angel. He didn't become a machine or an AI either. And our nature has been elevated and blessed beyond measure by the gift of God assuming human nature to itself. And with that as a foundation, all of us, Christian and otherwise, can have a conversation based on that shared principle in response to these challenges. And I think that's wonderful.
Beautiful.
Brad, I appreciate that aspect of the document, and that is, as a use, really helpful. As just a launching off point, I do hope that this does provoke the kind of reflection we saw elsewhere, kind of in response, more kind of deepening this. I think it needs it. I think it's a beginning. It's certainly not an end for me. It can't be an end. Obviously, the phenomenon is just going to keep growing and developing. And so you could never, whatever we say, whatever we record right now is going to be, obsolete in, 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days. Brad,
I will say something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to end on a really positive note, I think, is that, my sense is that, even, among the tech bros, in many cases, there are the ones that just sort of. So you had two categories, right? The sort of, the tech bros that are sort of excited about creating something greater than them, and then kind of all the ordinary people that are just sort of have a nagging sense that something's wrong here but can't articulate it. But I think there's a third group, which is the elite tech bros that have a nagging sense that something is wrong, and that they themselves have had a worldview that does. They're suddenly staring down the kind of reductio ad absurdum of their own worldview.
Yeah.
They've defined themselves by their super performance, and now they've realized there's something more super performant than they are. And so they're like, is this all that humanity actually is? And so there's a real, moment for the gospel here, and what I've just seen tremendous openness to theology, tremendous interest in these kinds of questions among, sectors of people who would have been just seemed to be as far away from God as you could be 5 years ago. And I think you see that in the fact that, the very close interaction between the Anthropic people and the Vatican, which is, a little creepy. And, I have mixed feelings about it, but most of the Anthropic people are, Enlightenment secular humanists, but who are nonetheless like, we really need to talk to some of these theologian people because they understand something that we don't. And so I think, there's an exciting opening there.
Yeah,
Well
and
said.
and I think that's a good note to end on is really realizing that there are always openings for the gospel, and even on the other side of AI, that's not going to change, right? This is some point I want to make elsewhere is when it comes to generational discussions, people often have this fundamental mistake of like, well, this new generation is this weird new generation that is uniquely among all generations fundamentally impervious to the work of the Holy Spirit or something like that. And there's something similar I think can happen when it comes to kind of new technological epochs and eras. This is going to be the ones uniquely devoid of the agency of the Spirit to bring forward the church into the new. No. Right. The Spirit is Spirit, tech is tech, and God is God. And those things are not going to change, no matter how many new things come on the horizon. With that in mind, Brad Littlejohn, thank you so much for joining us. This is a great discussion. Hope to have you on again. If you have listened thus far, thank you for listening. Feel free to rate and review us on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen. But for now, this has been Mere Fidelity.